Hello and welcome to another episode of Armored Warfare with Czar Peppers. In today's video we're looking at the Federal Republic of Germany's, or West German, Leopard 1 and Leopard 1A5 main battle tanks. A vehicle that represents an interesting shift in tank design, mainly spurred on by the advances in tank ammunition at the time. The design originated as a collaborative project with West Germany, France, and Italy in the 1950s, but eventually the partnership fell apart and the Germans took on the project by themselves. At the time it was being designed, there was a proliferation of extremely effective heat ammunition, particularly by the Soviet Union. Considering that much of this ammunition could easily penetrate most thicknesses of steel armor, the Germans decided to take a different approach to designing the Leo 1. Rather than producing a tank with thick armor in order to stop incoming rounds, which they thought was impossible against the ammunition of the day, they decided to use thin armor, or thin compared to other tanks from the period anyways, and combine that with a powerful engine and a great gun, namely the British L7 105mm. This resulted in a tank with serious firepower, able to drive at a brisk 65 kilometers an hour or 30 miles per hour. At this point, it's worth mentioning that in armored warfare, heat rounds don't really act as they do in real life. In game, they have less penetration than armor-piercing rounds but do higher damage, whereas armor-piercing have more penetration but do less damage. In reality, heat ammunition generally has greater penetration than AP rounds when firing at basic steel armor. Of course, these days, with the proliferation of composite armor, it's usually AP rounds that have greater effect. But that's just how they decided to go for the gameplay in Armored Warfare. The only specifications for the Leo 1's armor was that it had to withstand 20mm autocannon fire from all sides, and that it weighed no more than 30 tons with a power-to-weight ratio of 30 horsepower per ton. Overall, mobility was first priority, with firepower second and armor protection last. As mentioned earlier, the Germans didn't think it was even possible to make armor that could defeat heat ammunition from the time, and came to the conclusion that the best armor was essentially a target that was moving so fast that it would be difficult to hit in the first place. One problem with the Leo 1 was that by the time it entered service in 1965, it was already pretty much obsolete. The Soviets had already begun production on the new T-62 with heavier armor and the 115mm gun. At the time, the only tank that could provide serious opposition to the new Soviet design was the British Chieftain with the 120mm gun, much more effective against the new designs than the Leopard's 105mm L7. Afterwards, there were a number of different revisions to the Leopard with the Leo 1A1, the 1A3, and 1A4. They had a number of different improvements, most notably being the addition of spaced armor and newer fire control and vision systems. In the early 1980s, there was a program to look at further possible improvements that could be made to the Leo 1 design. This consisted of modern fire control systems and nighttime and rough weather vision improvements. However, they would require a newly redesigned turret in order to fit all of the new equipment. The resulting turret was large enough to fit all the new equipment, along with the ability to mount a 120mm gun from the Leopard 2, which was already in service at the time. But the gun was never actually fitted to the 1A5, but it did see the addition of far more effective armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding saber rounds for the existing gun. Over the course of its life, the Leopard 1 has been used by a number of different countries: Germany, Australia, Belgium, Denmark, Greece, Italy, Lebanon, Turkey, and here in Canada. Most of our Leopard 1s were pulled from service in the mid-2000s, but we actually still use around 60 of them even today. But as of 2007, we had most replaced with 60 Leopard 2A4s and 20 Leopard 2A6Ms, which sure isn't many tanks compared to our neighbor. So over the course of its life, the Leopard 1 has been one of the quintessential Western tank designs used by many nations in and outside of the NATO alliance, and representing a rather radical departure from main battle tank design at the time of its conception. However, it didn't ever have much of a chance to prove itself in the field against other tanks. Its use has mainly been limited to conflicts with guerrilla movements. They have been used by the Turkish military against the Kurdish people, a conflict that is still going on today and is also the reason why Turkey has been known to support ISIS. They were also used by the Canadian forces during their operations in Afghanistan during the War on Terror. The only real glimpse of how the Leo 1 would have performed was during the Bosnian War, when a Danish force of several Leopard 1A5s, operating as part of a United Nations force, were ambushed by Serbian forces. The Serbs brought in 3 T-55s into the attack. However, Danish tank crews noticed that on their thermal sights the T-55 gun barrels were cool, indicating that they weren't firing, so they didn't fire at them. But there have been conflicting reports saying that 3 Serbian tanks were actually hit by the Leos. So I suppose we'll never know what the Leo 1 would have been like in a major engagement with other armor, but at the end of the day, isn't that the greatest victory a tank could ever achieve, not needing to be used in combat? So until next time, see ya.